Why is this trash here? That was the first sentence my biological mother threw in my face after 9 agonizing years of dead silence. Not a single ounce of remorse. She hissed it right in the middle of my sister's $1 million super wedding, loud enough to make 200 billionaire guests turn their heads. Right now, my sister, the bride in a diamond-encrusted gown, steps back as if I were some disgusting stain. "You are not invited, get out." She's panicking, terrified the financial elite will discover her grunt of a little sister. She's right, she didn't invite me. They spent 9 whole years erasing my existence, so they have absolutely no idea who actually placed that gold-rimmed invitation on my steel desk. And they definitely don't know that the billionaire groom they are clinging to owes me his life. Before I tell you how I crushed their fake empire without ever raising my voice, let me know where you are watching from and what time it is right now. Hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you agree. There is no cruelty more ruthless than the favoritism of your own blood. The string quartet in the corner stops playing. A dead, suffocating silence drops over the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel. 200 of the most powerful people on the East Coast hold their breath. The low murmur of networking and the clinking of fine crystal completely halts. Victoria's finger is shaking. The massive diamond on her hand catches the chandelier light, blinding and sharp. She points directly at the heavy oak doors. "Security, get her out of here." I do not move. My tactical boots are rooted to the imported marble. I do not blink. I look past her panicked face to the man standing near a massive ice sculpture. Richard Vance, my father. An investment bank director who calculates risk and profit margins for a living. He calculates this one, adjusts his expensive silk tie, and turns his face away. He finds a sudden intense interest in a towering arrangement of white roses. Total cowardice. The muscles in my neck tighten. I force a sharp inhale through my nose. 4 seconds in. Hold for 4. Exhale for 4. Hold for 4. Box breathing. The exact same drill that kept my heart rate under 80 beats per minute when mortars were tearing up the dirt just outside our compound in Kandahar. I forced my jaw to unclench. No tears, no raised voice, just cold, dead calculation. I am looking at a room full of soft, terrified people hiding behind expensive fabric. A heavy hand slides onto the small of my back. Marcus. Solid. Grounding. His thumb presses firmly against my spine through the fabric of my dress. He doesn't say a word. He doesn't need to. The sheer physical presence of a former Navy SEAL is enough to make the 3 hotel security guards stop dead in their tracks, 5 feet away from us. They recognize a predator when they see one. 3 weeks ago, the environment was entirely different. Concrete walls, slate gray floors, the low, endless hum of server racks cooling. The air smelled of ozone, burnt coffee, and industrial cleaner. Aegis Security Headquarters, my fortress. I sat behind a brushed steel desk. A thick, cream-colored envelope sat dead center on the cold metal surface. It had passed through a bomb sniffer, a chemical swab, and an X-ray machine before my head of security allowed it anywhere near my office. Heavy parchment paper. Gold foil stamping thick enough to feel under your thumb. Addressed in flawless flowing calligraphy, requested presence of Mr. and Mrs. Marcus Horn. I slid a tactical folding knife from my pocket, flicked the blade open, sliced the seal. The card slid out heavy and arrogant, the words burned into my retinas. The Sterling Vance nuptials. Julian Sterling to Victoria Vance. I stared at the name. My breath caught in my throat just for a fraction of a second. The Sterling Empire Global Logistics, Private Wealth Management, was inviting the chief executive officer of Aegis Security to their private island of wealth. Eleanor Sterling, the matriarch, wanted the absolute best private military contractors in the room. They had zero clue they were rolling out the red carpet for the discarded, worthless daughter of their future in-laws. The office door pushed open. Marcus walked in. His boots dragged slightly on the concrete, an old habit from carrying heavy gear in the sand. He set a ceramic mug on the steel desk. Black coffee, bitter and scalding. He looked at the invitation. He looked at my face. His jaw tightened, the muscles ticking under his beard. You don't have to clear this sector," he said. His voice was a low rumble, giving me the out. I picked up the coffee. The heat grounded me. No, I said, my voice flat. You never turn your back on an active minefield. You step into it and you dismantle the trigger. Back in the blinding light of the ballroom, the security guards are still frozen, waiting for an order that no one has the spine to give. I step back. Just one step. I let Marcus step forward to intercept the nervous murmurs of the billionaires. He owns the space instantly. I retreat to the edge of the room. The mahogany bar. The bartender is staring at me, swallowing hard as he wipes down a spotless counter. He slides a gin and tonic toward me. I don't drink it. I pick up the lemon wedge resting on the rim of the glass. Through the crowd, Evelyn Vance steps up to the main stage, my mother, senior partner at a Wall Street law firm. She smooths down her designer gown and taps the microphone. A sharp screech of audio feedback cuts through the room. She smiles. It is a predatory plastic thing. Thank you all for being here. Her voice echoes off the vaulted ceiling, crisp, heavily rehearsed. Today we give away our greatest achievement. Victoria is our pride, our brilliant, beautiful. She pauses for dramatic effect. Our only child. My fist closes. The lemon wedge bursts in my palm. Acidic juice floods over my skin. It seeps into the jagged, raised shrapnel scar stretching across my knuckles. The burn is sharp, vicious. I don't wipe it off. A bullet tears through flesh and leaves a hole. But that word, only. That word is a completely different kind of violence. Being erased while you are standing right there, breathing the exact same air. The stinging acid on my scarred hand bites deeper. It drags my mind backward, pulling me violently away from the chandeliers and the expensive champagne. It drags me right back to the suffocating itch of a cheap dress that didn't fit standing in the cold hallway of my childhood home. Standing right in front of that damn wall of framed diplomas. The wall that told me exactly what I was worth. The acidic juice from the crushed lemon wedge burns into the jagged shrapnel scar on my hand. The sting is sharp, vicious. It yanks my mind backward, pulling me violently away from the crystal chandeliers and the string quartet of the Plaza Hotel. It drags me 11 years into the past. The chemical burn on my hand fades into a different kind of physical irritation. The suffocating, prickling itch of a cheap, stiff polyester dress scraping against my collarbone. I was 17 years old. Sunday dinner at the Vance estate in Connecticut. It was never a family meal. It was a shareholder meeting. A quarterly earnings report disguised under heavy white linen tablecloths, sterling silver cutlery, and the rich smell of roasted garlic and expensive red wine. Richard Vance. My father sat at the head of the long mahogany table. He was a silent accomplice in a tailored suit. A man who handed over every ruthless domestic decision to his wife so he could keep his hands clean. The only sound in the suffocating room was the dry, harsh scrape of his serrated steak knife cutting into a piece of rare beef. He chewed slowly. He swallowed. Then he tapped the heavy silver handle of his fork against the edge of his porcelain plate. One sharp clink. That was the signal. Time to report the return on investment. Victoria sat up straight. She smoothed down the fabric of her tailored silk dress, her manicured nails flawless. She cleared her throat and began reciting her advanced placement scores, her Ivy League early acceptance probabilities, and her debate team victories. She read the numbers smoothly, effortlessly, like a Wall Street broker, listing soaring stock prices to a board of hungry directors. Evelyn, my mother, nodded in slow, calculating approval. I sat completely still at the opposite end of the table. I kept my hands buried deep in my lap, hidden entirely beneath the thick tablecloth. My knuckles were split open. The skin was raw, wrapped in cheap white athletic tape, stained with dried blood and sweat. I'd spent 4 hours that afternoon hitting a 100-pound canvas heavy bag in a damp, unheated garage down the street. I was building muscle. I was building lung capacity. I was building armor. I knew the real world was violent, unforgiving, and chaotic. I was preparing my body to protect people in it. But in this house, physical grit was not a virtue. It was a massive liability. It was considered lower class, grunt work. Manual labor meant you were too stupid to sit in a boardroom. After the plates were cleared by the silent kitchen staff, the ritual continued in the main living room. This room was dominated by one single feature: the wall. It was a massive stretch of custom cherry wood paneling bathed in the sickly yellow glow of brass picture lights. It was a shrine, a monument to elite certificates, Harvard business degrees, Wharton financial certifications. Thick parchment paper encased in heavy gold leaf frames. Evelyn stood in front of the wall, swirling a glass of deep red wine. She looked at the framed degrees, and then she looked at her daughters. She did not see human beings. She saw blue-chip assets. You either increased the value of the family portfolio, or you were a bad investment. Blood meant absolutely nothing. Prestige meant everything. Anyone who threatened to lower the market value of the Vance name had to be purged from the ledger. The breaking point arrived 2 weeks later. The college application deadline. I did not fill out the forms for the elite business schools. I did not write the groveling, arrogant essays begging for a spot in an Ivy League lecture hall. Instead, I walked into the living room and dropped a single thin manila folder on the glass coffee table. Military enlistment papers. United States Army. Evelyn stopped swirling her wine. The dark red liquid sloshed aggressively against the crystal glass. She looked down at the folder, then up at my face. She did not yell. Yelling was for people who lacked control. Instead, she used a tone so flat and dead it could cut through bone. "What is this?" "I am enlisting," I said. My voice did not shake. I locked my knees. I kept my spine completely straight, projecting my voice from my chest, just like the recruiters taught me. I ship out for basic training after graduation. Evelyn picked up the folder. She did not even open it. She dropped it onto the hardwood floor and stepped on it with the sharp, needle-like heel of her designer shoe. "You are not going to be some uneducated grunt," she hissed, her voice dropping to a toxic, venomous whisper. "You are not going to throw away my money to go be cannon fodder in the dirt. I did not spend 18 years raising a piece of meat. I am serving my country. I am going to protect people." "You are going to embarrass me," she snapped. Her eyes were black, completely void of any maternal warmth. Soldiers are the bottom of the food chain. They are the people who take orders from the people in this room. By doing this, you are choosing to be garbage. I did not argue. I did not explain myself. I turned around and walked out of the room, leaving the papers under her heel. I thought that was the end of it. I thought the worst she could do was insult my choice and cut off my funding. I was wrong. The real punishment came 2 days later. I walked into the house after a 5-mile run in the freezing rain. My tactical boots were muddy. My lungs were burning, pulling in the cold air. As I stepped into the hallway, I heard a sharp, violent sound echoing from the living room. Smack, smack, smack. It was the heavy sound of a hammer hitting a steel nail. I walked into the living room. Evelyn was standing on a small wooden step stool in front of the wall. She held a heavy brass hammer in her right hand. She stepped down and turned to face me. Behind her, hanging directly beneath Victoria's gleaming Ivy League early acceptance letter, was a brand new frame. It was the largest one on the entire wall. Heavy mahogany wood, thick polished glass, draped in expensive gold leaf. But there was no diploma inside. There was no certificate of achievement. There was no name printed in elegant calligraphy. It was completely, utterly empty. Just a blank sheet of dark velvet backing staring out from behind the cold glass. Evelyn looked at my wet, muddy clothes with pure, unadulterated disgust. She raised her hand and pointed the steel head of the hammer directly at the empty glass. "Look at it," she commanded. I stared at the void inside the gold frame. The silence in the room was suffocating, pressing down on my chest, heavier than any weighted vest I had ever run in. "If you put on that uniform," Evelyn said, her voice echoing off the hardwood floor like a judge handing down a death sentence, "your place in this house stays permanently empty, just like this frame. You will not exist." The threat of the empty gold frame was not just a metaphor, it was a promise. And Evelyn executed that promise exactly 3 months later on the day I graduated high school. The setting was the Oak Ridge Country Club. Manicured golf courses, valet parking for German sports cars. The smell of imported cigars and cut grass hung thick in the warm evening air. I stood near the edge of the brick patio wearing a simple black dress. No pearls, no designer heels. I watched the people who shared my last name mill around the open bar. My Aunt Clara walked past. She stopped looking me up and down. Her nose crinkled like she had just caught a whiff of spoiled milk. "So," she said, taking a slow sip of her dirty martini, "you are really doing it, going off to be cannon fodder. Good luck with that." She did not wait for an answer. She just turned her back and walked away. The large canvas banner hanging over the main dining room was supposed to be for me, class of 2013. But within 30 minutes, the graduation party was completely hijacked. Victoria had just received her acceptance letter for the MBA program at Harvard. She stood in the center of the room, wearing a tailored white silk dress, soaking up the attention like a sponge. Evelyn stood up. She grabbed a heavy silver fork. Clink, clink, clink. The sharp, high-pitched sound of silver striking lead crystal cut through the low jazz music. The room went dead silent. 200 pairs of eyes turned toward the matriarch of the Vance family. Evelyn smiled. It was the exact same plastic calculated smile she used in a courtroom right before tearing a hostile witness to shreds. She raised her glass of champagne. She did not look at me, not even a passing glance. "Tonight we celebrate the future," Evelyn announced. Her voice carried over the room, crisp and loud. "We celebrate intellect. We celebrate the Vance legacy. Some children inherit brilliance and elevate the family name to new heights." She gestured toward Victoria. The room erupted in polite applause. Evelyn waited for the clapping to die down. Then her smile flattened into a cold, hard line. Her eyes finally flicked to the dark corner of the room where I stood. "And some choose a different path," she said. The temperature in the room dropped. "Some choose to drag the family name through the mud, to settle for the absolute bottom, to roll around in the dirt because they lack the capacity for greatness. We do not celebrate failure in this family." To Victoria, the future queen of Wall Street, scattered chuckles, a few arrogant smirks from my older cousins. My high school graduation party had just been turned into a public execution. Richard, my father, stood right next to Evelyn. He raised his glass, nodding in total agreement. "To Victoria," he echoed, a loyal puppet in a tailored suit. Every eye in the room shifted to me. They wanted a reaction. They wanted me to break. They wanted the 18-year-old girl to drop her head, burst into tears, and run out the back door in total shame. That would validate them. It would prove I was weak. It would prove I belonged in the dirt. I did not give them a single drop of satisfaction. I sat down in a heavy wooden chair near the wall. I planted my feet flat on the floor. I gripped the wooden armrests. I squeezed the wood until the blood drained completely from my knuckles, turning my skin bone white. I locked my spine straight, shoulders back, chin parallel to the floor. The exact posture the Army recruiter had drilled into me during physical training. I stared directly at my mother. I did not blink. I did not look away. I stared at her with a look of absolute hollow emptiness. I refused to play the victim in her twisted theater. Evelyn held my gaze for 3 long seconds before she shifted her eyes away, irritated that I was not crying. The party dragged on for another 2 hours. I stayed in my chair, silent, immovable. When the crowd finally started migrating toward the dining hall for dinner, a rough hand grabbed my shoulder. I turned. It was Peggy. My grandmother did not wear silk. She wore a thick wool cardigan over a plain cotton blouse. Her hands were spotted with age, but her grip was like a steel vise. Peggy had served as a combat nurse in the United States Army during Vietnam. She stitched up young men with missing limbs in dirty medical tents. She knew what real blood looked like. She knew the difference between real honor and a fragile ego. She did not say a word inside the building. She pulled me out the side door into the cool night air of the patio. The heavy glass door clicked shut, cutting off the noise of the wealthy crowd inside. Peggy reached into her deep pocket. She pulled something out and shoved it hard against my chest. I caught it instinctively. It was heavy, cold, solid brass. I looked down at my hands. A military-issue compass. The metal was heavily tarnished, scratched and dented from years in the field. But as I held it, the brass began to absorb the heat from my palms. It felt warm. It felt real. Peggy looked at me. Her eyes were sharp, cutting right through the dark. "Honor is not printed on parchment," Peggy said. Her voice was a low, gravelly rasp. "Honor is what you do when the bullets start flying. Do not ever let those people tell you what you are worth." I traced the cracked glass of the compass dial. "They erased me, Grandma." "Good," Peggy snapped. She pointed a crooked finger at the building. "You do not want to belong in a room like that. Do not get down on your knees and beg for love that is measured in dollars. You take this. You find your own true north. You build your own fortress. And you never let them inside." She patted my cheek, once her rough skin scratching my face. Then she turned and walked back inside, leaving me alone in the dark. I stood on the patio for a long time. The brass compass sat heavy in my palm. My mother had just publicly disowned me. My father had stood by and watched. I had absolutely nothing left in that house. I closed my fist around the cold metal. I slipped the compass into my pocket, turned my back on the bright lights of the country club, and walked down the dark driveway. I was leaving the Vance family behind forever. I thought walking away was the hardest part. I thought the worst damage had already been done. I had absolutely no idea what they were doing to my bank account while I was walking down that dark road. I thought walking away meant I was free. I was 19 years old. I walked into a Chase Bank in downtown Manhattan, holding a faded green military duffel bag. The air conditioning inside the lobby was freezing. I slid my ID under the glass, asking the teller to transfer my grandfather's trust fund so I could buy a used truck to get to my first duty station. The teller typed on her keyboard. The plastic keys clicked loudly in the quiet room. She frowned at the monitor. "I'm sorry, miss," she said, tapping the screen. "Your balance is 0. The screen showed a total withdrawal, $3 million. Cleaned out completely by the primary account custodians. My parents. I took the train straight back to the Connecticut estate. I did not bother knocking. I pushed the heavy oak door open and marched into the parlor. Evelyn was sitting in a high-backed leather chair, signing a thick stack of legal documents. "Where is it?" I demanded. She did not even look up. "Liquidated." That was my trust fund. It was family capital. Evelyn replied coldly, turning a page. Victoria needed seed money for her new venture capital firm. Real estate, tech startups, high-yield investments. Money breeds money, Lucia. It isn't thrown away on a grunt. She finally put her gold pen down. She looked at my scuffed boots, then at the cheap duffel bag slung over my shoulder. "You chose the dirt," she said, her voice completely devoid of emotion. "So go live in it." She picked up her phone and dialed the neighborhood security gate. 10 minutes later, I was standing on the curb. The heavy iron gates slammed shut behind me. The heavy metal padlock clicked. It was financial abuse wrapped up in a cashmere sweater. Fast forward 3 years. Forget the country club. Forget the white linen tablecloths and the stock portfolios. My reality was a combat zone in the Middle East. The air tasted like copper-blowing sand and burnt cordite. Fine grit coated my teeth every time I opened my mouth to breathe. We took heavy fire on a rocky ridgeline. Sergeant Miller went down. He was 60 years old, a career soldier who had given his entire adult life to the uniform. He had a bad knee and a laugh that sounded like a truck engine misfiring. Now his right leg was shredded by shrapnel. I did not think about Ivy League degrees. I did not think about return on investment. I grabbed the heavy nylon drag strap on the back of his tactical vest. Miller was 220 pounds of dead weight. I hoisted him onto my shoulders. My knees buckled under the load. My lungs burned like I was inhaling broken glass. But I locked my spine. I dragged him 60 yards through the burning sand while enemy bullets cracked the air right above our helmets. His blood soaked completely through my uniform. It was hot. It was sticky. I threw him behind a concrete barrier and clamped my bare hands down on his femoral artery, fighting to keep the pressure tight. Miller grabbed my wrist. His grip was shaking violently, but he looked me dead in the eye. That was when I learned the truth. Human dignity is not a certificate sitting in a gold frame. It is not a bank account balance. Dignity is the brutal physical weight you are willing to carry when everything around you goes to hell. I was 23 when the phone call came. Peggy was dead. I did not pack a black suit. I did not have time. I boarded a military transport flight out of the combat zone, then caught a commercial red-eye back to the East Coast. I was wearing the exact same combat boots I had worn in the sand. My uniform jacket was still stained with sweat and dried dirt. I arrived at the high-end funeral home in upstate New York in the middle of a torrential downpour. Black umbrellas, valet parking for expensive hearses. I walked up the slick marble steps. Two men in tailored black suits stepped out to block the entrance. Private security. The taller one put his heavy palm flat against my chest and shoved me backward into the rain. "Guest list only," he grunted. He held a clipboard. I looked down at the paper. I saw my name. It was violently crossed out with a thick black marker. Evelyn stood inside the glass double doors. She wore a flawless black mourning veil. She looked at my muddy boots, the dirt on my jacket, and the tarnished brass compass hanging around my neck. She did not open the door. She just mouthed the words slowly through the thick, soundproof glass. "Not in my house. You are a disgrace." She turned her back and walked away toward the chapel. A low-class grunt in a dirty uniform was not going to pollute her high society funeral. The heavy doors locked. The deadbolt clicked loudly. I stood outside in the freezing rain. The water soaked through my uniform, chilling my skin down to the bone. From inside the building, I could hear the faint, haunting sound of a choral hymn echoing through the walls. They were saying goodbye to the only person in my bloodline who ever looked at me and saw a human being. And they locked me out. My hands clamped around the wrought iron fence. I squeezed the cold black metal until the rusted spikes dug deep into my palms. My skin broke. Warm blood mixed with the cold rain. My chest caved in. The pain was completely suffocating. I pulled my phone from my pocket. The screen was cracked. My thumb was shaking so hard I could barely unlock the keypad. I opened my voicemail. Saved messages. One new. I pressed the phone to my ear. The static hissed over the speaker, competing with the loud drumming of the pouring rain. Then Peggy's voice, weak, struggling for air. "Lucia, do not delete this message. You listen to me." 12 seconds. The recording cut off. Just dead air. My knees hit the wet concrete. I knelt in the puddles, the rain pounding against my back. I let the water wash the dirt from my face. I let it wash the grief out of my chest. I let it wash away the very last drop of naive hope that I ever had a family. I slowly got to my feet. My jaw locked tight. The cold anger settled deep into my stomach, turning into solid ice. I looked at the funeral home. I looked at the closed doors of the elite. They locked me out because I did not own the building. Because I had no power. I wiped the blood from my hand onto my wet pants. I turned my back on the wrought iron gates. I was going to build a fortress entirely out of steel and concrete, and I was going to make sure no one on earth ever had the power to close a door in my face again. I was 24. The air in the extraction zone tasted like burning diesel sulfur and copper. We were pulling a tech billionaire out of a hostile sector in the Middle East. The convoy was pinned down behind a crumbling concrete wall. My rifle barrel was hot enough to brand skin. Fine grit ground between my teeth every time I opened my mouth to breathe. A black armored SUV slammed to a halt in the blinding dust. The extraction team. Navy SEALs. The team leader stepped out into the chaotic crossfire. Marcus Horn. He did not yell. He did not panic. He moved through the flying debris with the cold mechanical precision of a man who had lived his entire adult life in the violent dark. He grabbed the panicked billionaire by the Kevlar vest, shoving him violently into the back of the armored vehicle. Then Marcus turned and looked at me. Through the smoke and the shouting, his eyes dropped to my chest. He stared at the tarnished brass compass hanging by a piece of paracord over my body armor. He did not ask a single question. He just gave me a short, hard nod. Scars recognize scars. You do not need to explain the dark to someone who already knows exactly how to navigate it. 3 months later, Marcus turned in his trident. He walked away from the military. I pooled every single dollar of my combat hazard pay, combined it with a small military loan, and leased a massive empty concrete warehouse in Virginia. We built Aegis Security on a freezing concrete floor. No trust funds, no venture capital from wealthy relatives, no silver spoons. We built it with our own blood, sweat, and the brutal discipline of people who had absolutely nothing to fall back on. We slept on military cots in the back office. The air always smelled like gun oil, cheap black coffee, and stale takeout food. Marcus became my director of operations. He also became the only person on this earth who could read my silence. 2 years of grinding labor passed. The business was pulling in 7 figures. We were securing supply chains for global shipping conglomerates and guarding politicians who used to look down on people in uniform. Marcus and I decided to get married. No country club, no white silk dresses, no crystal chandeliers, just a private stretch of public beach in Florida, a massive cooler filled with local craft beer, and a dozen combat veterans who had bled in the exact same dirt we had. But childhood trauma is a stubborn, deeply rooted infection. It hides in the bone. A week before the wedding, I had a pathetic moment of weakness. The lingering ghost of a daughter desperately wanting her mother to acknowledge her. I bought a heavy-stock, plain white invitation card. I sat at my steel desk for an hour, staring at the blank paper. Finally, I picked up a pen. I wrote down the coordinates of the beach. I wrote the time. I addressed it to the Vance Estates in Connecticut. I walked down the street and dropped it into a blue postal box. I left the door cracked open just 1 inch, hoping my mother would finally choose to walk through it. 13 days later. I was standing on the wooden deck of our beach house. The ocean breeze was heavy with salt and the smell of rotting seaweed. I opened the rusted metal mailbox. There it was, my own envelope. The postal service stamp across the top read, "Return to sender." But the envelope was not sealed. It had been sliced open cleanly with a letter opener. She had read it. I pulled the thick white card out. The blinding Florida sun hit the paper, making the ink glow. Red ink, thick, sharp, vicious. Evelyn had taken a red felt-tip pen and slashed a violent, jagged line directly through my printed name. She pressed the pen down so hard the paper was physically torn in the center. The red ink bled into the expensive cardstock like an open, infected wound. Below that slash, in her flawless, calculating handwriting, were 3 sentences. A grunt, marrying a grunt. Do not pollute the Vance name with this lower-class trash. Do not ever expect me to show up. I stood completely still on the wooden planks. The paper fluttered aggressively in the ocean wind. She did not just reject me, she dragged Marcus into it. She looked at a man who had spent a decade defending his country in the worst places on earth, a man who built an empire from the ground up, and she called him trash. Because he did not have a gold-framed Ivy League degree on a mahogany wall. Because his worth was measured in scars, not in stock options. The very last thread of blood loyalty snapped. It did not make a sound. It just dissolved, turning into cold ash and blowing away in the salt wind. The heavy sliding glass door rattled open behind me. Marcus walked out onto the deck. He wore faded denim jeans and a plain gray t-shirt. I could see the thick raised burn scar wrapping entirely around his right forearm. He stopped right beside me. He looked down at the torn paper. He saw the red ink bleeding through the white cardstock. He did not offer me a sad, pitying look. He did not wrap his arms around me and tell me that everything happens for a reason. He knew that was absolute garbage. Marcus reached out with a heavy, calloused hand. He took the card from my fingers. He crushed it into a tight, hard ball and tossed it effortlessly into the metal fire pit on the edge of the deck. Then he placed his heavy hand on my shoulder. His grip was solid, grounding, immovable. Absolute power is the quietest revenge, Marcus said. His voice was a low, steady rumble over the crashing waves. Let them keep their country clubs. Let them keep their fake inherited money. We are going to build this company until we own the very ground they walk on. He pulled me against his chest. I leaned into the solid muscle of his shoulder. I looked at the crumpled ball of paper sitting in the cold ashes of the fire pit. We will crush them from the dark, he promised. 4 years. That is exactly how long it took to build the monster. Aegis Security stopped being a startup in a cold Virginia warehouse. It evolved into a global private military contractor. We dealt in hard currency, encrypted data, and the brutal reality of keeping powerful people breathing. The same Wall Street politicians and hedge fund managers who used to scoff at people in combat boots now sat in my waiting room. They drank our bitter black coffee. They sweated through their custom-tailored suits. They pushed briefcases filled with millions of dollars across my steel desk, completely desperate to hire my men. The irony was not lost on me. The trash my mother threw out was now the only thing standing between her elite colleagues and a ransom video. But power is useless if it only serves the people who can afford it. 2 years ago, I sat in the server room at headquarters. The heavy mechanical hum of the cooling units drowned out the outside world. I watched a live feed from a drone circling a ruined city in Syria. Dust, rubble, collapsed concrete. I opened a new encrypted file on the main server. I typed in a name, the Peggy Fund. It was a completely classified nonprofit security initiative. I funded it quietly by skimming 10% off the top of every massive corporate contract Aegis signed. The objective was simple: unconditional, heavily armed protection for humanitarian aid workers operating in high-risk zones. People who actually cared about saving lives but had absolutely zero budget for security. Peggy did not leave me a trust fund. She left me a compass. She told me to protect people. This was my way of keeping her name alive while my mother used the Vance name to run a fake venture capital scam. A few months after the fund launched, Marcus walked into my office. He tossed a thin manila folder onto my desk. "Take a look at this one," he grunted. I flipped the file open. The photograph showed a young, clean-cut guy in his mid-20s. Expensive haircut, but he looked exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes. "Trust fund, kid?" I asked. "Used to be," Marcus said, crossing his heavy arms. He is the sole heir to a global logistics empire. Board of directors had his entire life mapped out. Ivy League, corner office, the whole silver spoon package. What happened? He told them to go to hell. Marcus smirked, refused to take the CEO job, flew to the Middle East to run a clean water initiative in a hostile sector. His family completely cut off his funding, froze his accounts, told him he would come crawling back when reality hit. I stared at the photograph. The story sounded way too familiar. A kid choosing the dirt over the boardroom. A family cutting the financial cord to force submission. Is he crawling back? I asked. No. He's out there digging wells while the local militia circles his camp. He has zero security. He is completely exposed. I closed the folder. I looked at the tarnished brass compass sitting on the edge of my desk. "Deploy a 4-man tactical team," I ordered. "Peggy Fund, covert overwatch. Keep him breathing, and do not let him know we are there." For 2 straight years, Aegis ghosts shadowed him. Through sandstorms, sniper fire, and ambushes. Our team fed him intel through anonymous channels. We sabotaged militia vehicles before they could reach his camp. He thought he was just incredibly lucky. He had absolutely no idea a private army was keeping the bullets out of his spine. I opened my eyes. The roar of the server room fades away, replaced by the soft, obnoxious hum of the string quartet. I am back in the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel. The acidic sting of the lemon juice on my scarred hand brings me completely into the present moment. I look across the room, past the crystal chandeliers and the towering ice sculptures. Evelyn is still standing on the stage, gripping the microphone, soaking up the polite applause of the billionaires. Victoria stands near the center of the dance floor, in her diamond-encrusted dress, playing the role of the perfect, brilliant, only child. And standing right next to Victoria, holding a glass of expensive champagne, is the groom. I look at his face. He's older now. The expensive haircut is back, but the dark circles under his eyes are still there. You never really lose that look once you have seen the dirt. The heir to the global logistics empire, the kid who dug wells in the sand. The man my covert team kept alive for 2 years on my direct orders. Julian Sterling. The universe has a vicious, beautiful sense of humor. The Vance family spent 9 years erasing my existence, building their entire fake empire around the Sterling family wealth. And they are currently licking the boots of a man who owes his heartbeat to the grunt standing by the bar. The loop is completely closed. I drop the crushed lemon wedge onto a cocktail napkin. I wipe my scarred hand on the side of my dress. I look up at Marcus. He's watching Julian. A slow, dangerous smile spreads across Marcus's face. He recognizes the kid he extracted from a hot zone 2 years ago. "Ready?" Marcus asks quietly. "Yes," I reply. I slide my hand into the crook of his heavy, muscular arm. I do not retreat to the lobby. I do not walk out the front doors. I square my shoulders. I lock my spine. I step off the marble edge of the bar area and walk straight across the open floor, cutting directly through the crowd of terrified elites. I am heading straight for VIP table number 2. Marcus and I cut straight through the center of the grand ballroom. The crowd parts for us automatically. There is a distinct difference between people who wear expensive suits to look powerful and people who actually are. We stop at VIP table number 2. In high society weddings, the seating chart is a brutal, unspoken hierarchy. Table 1 is for the bride and groom. Table 2 is the absolute nucleus of power. It is reserved for the heaviest hitters in the room. We sit down. On the opposite side of the massive dance floor, Evelyn is doing what she does best. Networking, shaking hands, smiling that plastic, calculated smile. She casually glances over the room, mentally checking the seating arrangements. Her eyes slide toward table 2. She stops, dead in her tracks. The glass of champagne in her hand tilts dangerously. Her flawless mask cracks. I watch the blood drain completely from her face. Her jaw goes slack. For half a second, the senior partner of a ruthless Wall Street law firm looks like she just got hit by a speeding freight train. The garbage she threw out onto the street is sitting at the epicenter of the empire she is desperately trying to marry into. Before Evelyn can even move, a shadow falls over our table. Eleanor Sterling, the matriarch of the Sterling Logistics Empire. She is wearing a dark, heavy velvet gown. She holds a crystal glass of scotch. She completely ignores the Vance family standing on the other side of the room. She walks directly to Marcus and me. Eleanor stops at our table. She nods respectfully. Captain Horn, Mrs. Horn. Eleanor. Marcus replies, his voice low and steady. She takes a slow sip of her scotch. Her eyes are sharp, calculating. Aegis Security is a fortress. We sleep much better knowing your people are handling our overseas transit routes. I was very glad to see you accepted the invitation. She turns her cold, appraising gaze toward me. Tell me, Mrs. Horn, do you know Victoria? She is the new addition to our family. I look past Eleanor's shoulder. Victoria is staring at me from the dance floor. She looks like a trapped animal. The panicked sweat is visible even under the heavy, expensive makeup. I take a slow, deliberate sip of my ice water. We grew up in the exact same town, I say. My voice is flat, dead neutral. Eleanor's eyes narrow just a fraction of an inch. She's a corporate shark. She can smell blood in the water. Is that right? She murmurs, swirling the scotch in her glass. She does not ask anything else. She simply nods and walks away to greet a senator. 2 minutes later, the assault happens. I step out of the ballroom, walking down the dim, quiet hallway toward the restrooms. The heavy oak doors muffle the noise of the party behind me. Footsteps hit the thick carpet fast and hard. A hand grabs my bicep. Long, sharp acrylic nails dig straight through the fabric of my dress, scratching my skin. Victoria. Her face is flushed red. The heavy layers of foundation are cracking around her mouth. She yanks my arm, trying to drag me further down the empty hallway. What the hell did you say to my mother-in-law? She hisses. Her voice is shaking, high-pitched, and frantic. You dirty little grunt. You are going to ruin this for me. I look down at her manicured hand gripping my arm. Then I look at her face. I do not yell. I do not pull away. I simply reach over with my left hand and grab her wrist. I apply a quick, sharp burst of pressure directly to the nerve bundle under her thumb. Victoria gasps in pain. Her fingers pop open instantly. She stumbles backward, rubbing her wrist, staring at me like I am a monster. What did you lie to them about? I ask. My voice is calm, razor sharp. It cuts right through her panic. I did not lie. She spits back, her chest heaving. I am a successful venture capitalist. I earned this. I take one slow step toward her. My tactical boots make zero noise on the thick carpet. A venture capitalist funded by $3 million stolen from my trust fund, I remind her. A firm that has not turned a legitimate profit in 4 years. You are drowning in debt, Victoria. And you need the sterling money to bail you out. She hits the wall. She has nowhere left to back up. The fake confidence shatters completely. They think I am the only child, she whispers. The words slip out before she can stop them. Her voice cracks. The panic turns into pure, unadulterated terror. They think I am the sole heir to the Vance estate. If they find out about you, if they find out what Mom did to the money, Eleanor will destroy the prenup. She will cancel the wedding. Victoria grabs the edge of my dress, a pathetic, desperate gesture. Please, she begs, her voice dropping to a frantic whisper. Just leave. Go out the back door. Do not ruin my life. I look at the woman who told me to get out of her sight 20 minutes ago. The golden child, the Ivy League genius. She is nothing but a hollow shell, terrified that her fake gold plating is about to peel off. I reach into my pocket. My fingers brush against the cold, tarnished brass of Peggy's compass. I do not turn around. I do not walk toward the exit. If you have ever had to stand your ground against a toxic family member, drop an anchor in the comments right now. Like this video and subscribe to the channel if you believe the truth always comes out in the end. I look Victoria dead in the eye. I am going back inside, I say, my voice dropping an octave. Let's see exactly how much pressure that fake armor can take. I turn my back on her and push the heavy oak doors open. As I step back onto the marble floor of the grand ballroom, the loud feedback of a microphone screeches through the speakers. The master of ceremonies taps the glass. Ladies and gentlemen, the MC announces, please take your seats. It is time for the toast. The waiters clear the empty plates of seared Wagyu beef and truffle risotto. The smell of rich, heavy food, imported flowers, and expensive perfume hangs thick over the grand ballroom. I sit back in my chair at VIP table number 2. Marcus rests his heavy arm on the back of my seat. We watch the main stage. A silver spoon taps against a lead crystal champagne flute. Clink, clink, clink. The low hum of the ballroom instantly dies. 200 billionaires, hedge fund managers, and politicians fall completely silent. Evelyn Vance steps up to the center microphone. She is draped in thousands of dollars of black Valentino silk. She looks out over the crowd. She feeds off their attention. It is her oxygen. She smiles, holding her glass high. We are gathered tonight to celebrate excellence, Evelyn says. Her voice echoes through the massive room, smooth, polished, and heavily rehearsed. In this world, pedigree matters. Education matters. Wealth is simply a reflection of superior intellect. We do not tolerate the bottom feeders. We build empires because we have the discipline to cut away the dead weight. There is no room for those who cannot climb to the top. The room erupts into polite, expensive applause. Cameras flash. Evelyn basks in the glow. She thinks she owns the world. I cross my legs. I slowly swirl the ice cubes in my water glass. They clink against the glass rim. I look at my mother. I do not feel anger anymore. I just feel pity. I am watching a car crash happen in slow motion, and the driver is pressing the gas pedal straight to the floor. She is a puppet smiling at the crowd while she happily ties the noose around her own neck. The applause fades. Julian Sterling steps up to the microphone. He does not smile. The polished corporate air persona drops completely. He fixes his cuffs. The dark circles under his eyes seem more pronounced under the heavy chandelier light. He does not look like a man about to celebrate a corporate merger. He looks like a man who has seen real blood in the dirt. He lowers his champagne glass to the wooden podium. Excellence, Julian repeats. The word sounds like ash in his mouth. My whole life, I was told excellence was a corner office, a massive stock portfolio, a name on a building. He grips the edges of the podium. His knuckles turn white. 2 years ago, I walked away from all of it. I went to the Middle East. I wanted to build water filtration systems in a combat zone. My family cut my funding. They told me I would fail. I was out there in the sand, completely exposed, and I should be dead right now. The ballroom goes dead silent. You can hear the air conditioning humming in the ceiling. I am standing here tonight not because of sterling money. Julian says, his voice hardening into solid steel. I am breathing right now because of people who actually bleed for a living. People who do the jobs this room pretends do not exist. Julian extends his arm. He points directly at VIP table number 2. The man who pulled me out of a collapsing building. The man who taught me how to survive when the money ran out. Captain Marcus Horn. The room collectively gasps. 200 heads snap toward our table. Evelyn Vance stops breathing. Her posture stiffens violently. Victoria looks like she just swallowed a handful of broken glass. Marcus does not stand up. He does not smile. He just looks at Julian and gives him a single short nod. Julian is not finished. He leans closer to the microphone. His voice booms through the heavy speakers, loud and absolute. And the second person... Julian continues looking right past the crowd, locking eyes with me. The CEO of Aegis Security. The woman who secretly deployed a tactical Overwatch team to keep me alive for 2 straight years. She used a private initiative called the Peggy Fund. She asked for 0 recognition. She asked for 0 money. She just kept me breathing. When he says the words, Peggy Fund, my chest tightens just a fraction of an inch. I feel the heavy brass compass sitting in my pocket. Peggy is in this room. Her name just silenced 200 billionaires. Julian raises his glass. He looks dead at Evelyn, then back to me. To my protector, Lucia Horn. The explosion is instantaneous. The room of politicians and corporate sharks erupts. They do not just applaud, they stand up. Metal chairs scrape loudly against the marble floor. The standing ovation is deafening. It is the heavy, thunderous sound of pure respect. Men in custom tuxedos who buy and sell global corporations before breakfast are standing on their feet, clapping for a combat veteran. For a grunt. For me. Crash. A sharp, violent sound cuts straight through the applause. Evelyn drops her crystal wine glass. It shatters into 100 jagged pieces on the hard marble floor. The dark red wine splatters across the hem of her Valentino silk dress. It seeps into the expensive white stone, spreading out like a crime scene. Her face is the color of wet concrete. The arrogant Wall Street lawyer is completely gone. She looks like she is choking on her own tongue. She stares at me, her eyes wide, her chest heaving. Her hands tremble so violently as she scrambles for the microphone that her rings rattle against the metal stand. There is a mistake, Evelyn stammers. The microphone feeds back, letting out a high-pitched, agonizing squeal. She is just a distant relative. She is confused. Victoria completely loses her mind. The panic finally breaks her. She grabs her diamond-encrusted veil and rips it backward. Her face is a twisted mask of pure terror. The sophisticated venture capitalist persona evaporates in a single second. She ignores the crowd. She ignores the cameras. She points a shaking manicured finger at me and shrieks at the top of her lungs like a cornered rat. You were not invited. Get out of my wedding. The standing ovation stops. The billionaires lower their hands, staring in absolute shock at the bride having a meltdown on the main stage. Julian steps away from the podium. He walks directly up to Victoria. His face is completely devoid of warmth. I personally put her invitation on the courier list, Julian says. His voice is ice cold. It carries through the dead silent room without a microphone. He turns his head slowly. He looks at Evelyn, who is still staring at the broken glass on the floor. Then he looks back at his bride. Victoria, Julian says slowly, emphasizing every single syllable. Did she just tell my mother you were an only child? The silence in the ballroom is deafening. Nobody breathes. At table 1, a heavy chair pushes back slowly. The wooden legs scrape against the marble floor. It sounds like a knife on a whetstone. Eleanor Sterling stands up. The heavy velvet of her gown drags on the floor. The matriarch of the Sterling Empire does not yell. She does not gasp. She turns her head slowly. She does not look at the crowd. She does not look at her son. She locks her eyes directly on Evelyn and Victoria Vance. It is the look of a guillotine blade right before it drops. Eleanor Sterling's stare is a guillotine blade waiting to drop. The silence in the grand ballroom is suffocating. Survival instinct is a dirty, primal thing. Evelyn Vance realizes she's backed into a corner. Her fake empire is currently standing on a trapdoor, and I am holding the lever. The arrogant Wall Street lawyer breaks first. Evelyn scrambles across the marble floor. Her high heels click frantically. The expensive black Valentino silk of her dress drags through the puddle of spilled red wine. She does not care. She shoves past a state senator and lunges straight for me. She grabs my bare arm. Her fingers are freezing cold. Her face is a shattered, ruined mess. The heavy layers of foundation are cracking. Black mascara runs down her cheeks, smudging into dirty gray streaks. She forces her mouth into a pathetic, trembling smile. "Lucia," she breathes out. Her voice is shaking. "My sweet girl, come with me. We need to talk outside." The sheer audacity is almost impressive. The woman who locked me out of a funeral in the freezing rain is now using the words, "sweet girl," as a bulletproof vest. She's using me as a human shield to block Eleanor Sterling's wrath. She pulls me toward the hallway. I let her. I want to see exactly how low she's willing to crawl. The heavy oak doors swing shut behind us, cutting off the stairs of the billionaires. The dim hallway is quiet. Evelyn drops the smile instantly. She is hyperventilating. The smell of expensive perfume mixes with the sour, metallic stench of pure panic sweat. "You win!" Evelyn gasps, leaning against the wall. She waves her hands frantically. "You made your point. Now get back in there and fix this. Tell Eleanor we are a family. Tell Julian it was a misunderstanding." I just stare at her. My heart rate is resting at 60 beats per minute. "Listen to me," she pleads, her voice dropping into a desperate, frantic whisper. "I will give you what you want. I will frame your Aegis Security corporate papers. I will put them right in the center of the wall, right above Victoria's degree. Everyone will see it. The wall, the brass picture lights, the gold leaf frames. At 18, I would have dragged myself over broken glass for a spot on that mahogany wall. Now I am 28. I look at this desperate, hollow woman, and that wall sounds like a pile of expensive garbage. She reaches for my arm again. "Lucia, please." I do not flinch. I do not get angry. I smile. It is a dead, cold smile. As her hand touches my skin, my muscle memory takes over. I grab her wrist with my left hand. I rotate my hip, stepping into her space. I lock her arm and apply a sharp, standard military wrist manipulation directly to her radial nerve. It is quick, brutal. Bone grinds against bone. Evelyn lets out a sharp, ugly gasp of pain. Her grip breaks instantly. Her knees buckle, but I do not let her fall. I shove her arm away with absolute disgust. "Do not touch me," I say. My voice is quiet, razor sharp. "And keep your trash off my corporate paperwork." I turn around. I push the heavy oak doors open and step backward into the blinding light of the ballroom. Evelyn stumbles in right behind me, rubbing her bruised wrist. Her face completely pale. 200 people are waiting. Nobody has moved. Eleanor Sterling stands perfectly still at table 1. She looks past Evelyn. She looks directly at me. "Mrs. Horn," Eleanor asks, a direct, lethal question. "Are you blood to this family?" I reach deep into my pocket. My calloused fingers wrap around the cold, heavy brass of Peggy's military compass. The metal grounds me. It anchors me to reality. I do not scream. I do not cry. I project my voice from my chest, clear and loud enough for every single politician and hedge fund manager to hear. I was born a Vance. I state cold, hard facts. When I was 19, I enlisted in the United States Army. My mother called me a piece of garbage. They drained $3 million from my trust fund to finance Victoria, and they threw me out on the street. I have not spoken a single word to them in 9 years. A collective murmur rips through the crowd. Men in custom tuxedos shake their heads in pure disgust. The Vance family name is completely dead in the water. Nobody in this room will ever do business with them again. I look over at Julian Sterling. He's staring at Victoria like she is a stranger. "Audit your bride's venture capital firm," I tell him. My voice cuts through the murmurs. "The money is gone. She's drowning in debt." That is why they needed this wedding. Victoria covers her face with her hands and starts sobbing loudly. Julian turns his back on her. He sets his champagne glass down on the table and walks away from the dance floor. The groom is done. I turn my head and look at Evelyn one last time. She is leaning against a marble pillar. She cannot breathe. Her eyes are wide, locked on my face. She finally realizes that the daughter she threw away is now the judge, the jury, and the executioner. "Leave the glass frame empty," I tell her. I do not wait for an answer. I hook my arm through Marcus's solid bicep. We turn our backs on the screaming bride and the ruined mother. We walk straight down the center aisle toward the main exit of the grand ballroom. Just as Marcus pushes the heavy front doors open, a sickening heavy thud echoes across the marble floor behind us. Evelyn's knees finally give out. She hits the floor. I do not look back. I step out into the cool New York night. The wind howling off the Atlantic is absolutely freezing. It whips across the flat exposed concrete roof of Aegis headquarters, cutting right through my heavy canvas tactical jacket. I stand near the edge of the roof, looking down at the empty Virginia highway, stretching out into the dark. I pull my phone from my pocket. My calloused thumb hovers over the cracked glass screen. For 5 long years, I only ever listened to the first 12 seconds of this voicemail. I never let it finish. I was too angry. I was too hurt. But tonight, standing in the cold air, my chest is completely hollow. The raging fire's gone. I press play. The small speaker crackles. The heavy hiss of static and rain fills the quiet space on the roof. Then Peggy's raspy, struggling voice cuts through the noise. Lucia, do not delete this message. You listen to me. I close my eyes. I let the recording play past the 12-second mark. Honor is not bought with dollars. Peggy breathes out. Her voice rattles with age and failing lungs, but the steel is still there. You are not some empty frame kid. You are a protector. You hold the line. Do not ever look back. I am so damn proud of you. 41 seconds, a sharp click, then dead air. I open my eyes. A single drop of warm salt water slides down my cheek, catching in the freezing wind. I do not wipe it away. It isn't grief. It is the massive, suffocating weight of a 10-year war finally leaving my bones. I finally forgive myself for wanting a mother who never actually existed. I look down at the glowing screen. I open my contact list. Evelyn Vance, block and delete. Richard Vance, block and delete. Victoria Vance, block and delete. My thumb taps the cold glass 3 times. No hesitation, no final words. The screen goes black. The bloodline is officially permanently severed. 6 weeks later. Eleanor Sterling did not just cancel a wedding. She ordered a complete financial slaughter. When you lie to a billionaire logistics matriarch, she does not yell. She deploys an army of corporate auditors and lawyers. The Sterling Intelligence Network gutted Victoria's venture capital firm in exactly 48 hours. The books were ripped wide open. It was a textbook shell game. Fraudulent financial statements, forged MBA transcripts. The millions they stole from my trust fund had been burned on bad real estate bets and designer clothes just to keep up appearances. The Securities and Exchange Commission stepped in. The annulment papers were served to Victoria at 2 o'clock in the morning by a private processor, voiding the marriage before the ink on the certificate even dried. Evelyn tried to do damage control. It was completely useless. Wall Street runs on leverage and reputation, and she had just been exposed as a con artist hiding behind a gold leaf frame. Her elite clients pulled their retainers overnight. The law firm hemorrhaged money and completely imploded. By the end of the month, Evelyn Vance filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The bank foreclosed on the Connecticut estate. The people who measured human worth in dollars were crushed under the absolute weight of their own currency. I am sitting at my steel desk when the notification chimes. I glance at the laptop monitor. A new email sits in the inbox, bypassing the corporate spam filter because of the last name. Sender, Richard Vance. Subject, please, we need help. I click the email open. It is a pathetic, groveling paragraph. The quiet, cowardly man who stared at the ceiling while his wife threw me out on the street is now begging for a massive corporate bridge loan from Aegis. He talks about losing the house. He uses words like family and forgiveness. I do not feel a shred of pity. Silent enablers are just as guilty as the people swinging the hammer. My hand remains perfectly steady on the mouse. I drag the email to the trash icon. I click empty folder. Delete permanently. Yes. The screen cleared. I close the laptop. 6 months later. The loading bay at Aegis headquarters smells like diesel fuel, heavy hickory wood smoke, and charred ribs. It is a Friday night. We dragged 2 massive steel smokers out onto the concrete pad. The heavy bass of a country rock song thumps from a portable speaker. Marcus is leaning against the massive mud-caked tire of an armored transport truck holding a cold IPA craft beer. He's laughing at something Julian Sterling just said. Julian looks entirely different. The expensive tailored suits are gone. He's wearing a faded thermal shirt, his sleeves rolled up holding a dark stout. He fits right in. Sitting next to Julian in a folding canvas chair is Sergeant Miller. The old grunt has a heavy titanium brace bolted to his right leg, but his loud misfiring engine laugh echoes across the concrete walls. He slaps Julian hard on the back, handing the billionaire heir a paper plate loaded with BBQ ribs. I lean against the cold steel door frame of the motor pool. I hold a bottle of beer, feeling the condensation dripping over the rough shrapnel scar on my right hand. I look at the wall to my left. It is solid, unpainted gray concrete. There is no mahogany paneling. There are no brass picture lights. There are no Ivy League degrees trapped behind thick glass. Pinned directly to the concrete is a tarnished purple heart medal, a heavy brass casing from a sniper rifle, a Polaroid photograph of Marcus and me standing on a Florida beach covered in sand, and a faded creased photo of Peggy in her combat nurse uniform smiling directly at the camera. A wall built entirely on scars, iron, and truth. Marcus looks over at me from across the bay. He stops talking. He raises his beer bottle in the air, a silent, steady salute. I raise my bottle back. I reach up with my left hand and press my palm flat against my chest. Right beneath my canvas jacket, suspended on a piece of thick paracord, the heavy brass compass sits warm against my skin. The needle is finally pointing to true north. The war is over. I am home. If this story resonated with you, hit the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe. Have you ever cut ties with toxic family? Thank you so much for listening, and see you next time.